Welcome and thanks for tuning in to our From the Book podcast. In this sermon miniseries, our pastor Zac Hatton will take us through a single verse in the book of 1 Chronicles in a sermon series titled The Prayer of Jabez.
We're going to do church today, if you don't mind. What do you think? 1 Chronicles chapter 4. 1 Chronicles chapter 4. You're going to be looking for verse number 10. Again, I want to let you know we're going to open up the service at the very, very end. I don't want that to be a shock to you. I don't want that to be a surprise to you at all. But if there is something weighing on your heart, I want you to be able to get comfortable in bringing that before God. I want you to use this time. If there's a person in your life that needs to be prayed for, use it. Worship. Cry out to Him. At the Lake Worth Baptist Church, we have been doing this. We've been trying to revitalize our prayer life. We've been trying to change the way that we pray. And we've been looking at it in the category of different prayers. The first prayer that you should be praying, Lord, take my life. Take it from me. What people expect from me, what I even expect from myself. God, I would, if it was left to myself, I wouldn't make it. God, would you take my life from me? Would you make something different out of it? That was prayer number one. Prayer number two, Lord, will you expand my life? We were looking at those words, oh, that thou wouldest bless me indeed. Talked about why that was significant, like a heart's cry. God, if you don't do this, it's never going to happen. God, if you don't do the blessing. And we talked about Jabez asking in such a way that he never says what the blessing was. We just talked about him offering a blank check before God, signing his name on it and said, God, you fill in the amount because anything that I ask for is going to be too small. Oh, that thou wouldest bless me indeed. Indeed. That's like adding 3 exclamation points at the end of a sentence. There's a cry, it's a prayer of desperation. Lord, would you take my life? Lord, would you expand my life? Last week, Lord, will you increase my life? We looked at these words, and enlarge my coast. An enlarged coast, remember, in the days of Jabez, had a reference to land, to physical land, which in return would have meant more influence and a greater voice in his community. But along with an added influence, we talked about this, comes an added responsibility. In the day and age that we're living in, to ask God to enlarge our coast would be to express to Him our desire to see more than we've ever seen in this church, to do more than we've ever done in this church, and to be more than we've ever been in this church. In essence, we're asking God to stretch us and make us grow as an individual and as a church body, to stretch us and make us grow and use us in new ways. God enlarges our spiritual coast by 3 ways, and this is a recap from last week. He does that by increasing our sphere of influence. The more that you pray that prayer, you'll find that God increases your sphere of influence. The ability of breaking into lives that I wouldn't be able to break into, and I would break into lives that you would never be able to break into, increasing the sphere of your influence, also multiplying the sum of your responsibilities, opportunities rather. The more people that God pours into your life, the more opportunities that He's going to give you to be faithful with. And then by extension, it's going to increase the size of our ministry here. Once again, we do need to be expanding our ministry here. I think the Great Commission demands it. And as you're praying all of this, as you're praying for God to take your life and to expand your life and to increase your life, you need to pray this prayer along with all of the others. Lord, will you enable my life? Will you enable my life? This has to do with God's enabling touch on your life. That's Jabez's third request. Take a look at it, 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 10. And that thine hand may be with me. That thine hand may be with me. Now let me tell you why this is important. It's important because if God's hand is not there to enable whatever it is that we're doing, there is a real danger that can take shape, and it shows up in a couple of different ways. If God's hand isn't on our lives, there's, first of all, a danger of self-sufficiency. A danger of self-sufficiency. Revelation chapter 2 and Revelation chapter 3, you'll read about 7 different churches in Revelation 2 and 3. And if you want to think about it like this, it was like Jesus was giving a report card for his churches. So he tells us everything that we need to know about what was right and what was wrong. And the very first church that you come across in these 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3 was Revelation 2. He mentions the church at Ephesus. And this is how the report card reads for Ephesus in Revelation chapter 2, verses 2 and 3. Jesus says this, I know thy works. For the Lake Worth Baptist Church, he could say, I know your works. I know what you're all about. I know thy works and thy labor and thy patience. And I know that you labor well and that you're patient, and how you cannot bear them which are evil, and thou hast tried them which say that they are apostles and are not, hast found them to be liars, and hast borne and has patience for my name's sake, and has labored and has fainted not. Now, as report cards go, that's a pretty good report card. It's a pretty good response to this church in Ephesus. They know how to work well together, right? They can't bear them that are evil. They have patience. They don't tolerate evil behavior among the congregation. That's a good quality to have if you're a church. Tried them that say that they're apostles. They knew how to use their Bible, and somebody comes in and says, we're an apostle. And they said, no, you're not. Know how to do that, know how to call them out, has found them to be liars, is born of patience for my name's sake. They know how to endure persecution. That's a good report card. If you stopped right there, looked like they got a grade A. They were a church who was growing in the midst of idolatry. They were a church who were prospering. But look at verse 4. Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee. Oh no. Because thou hast left thy first love. It wasn't the fact that they were doing ministry things. All of the ministry things that they had going, all of those were good things. Everything that I mentioned there. All of it was good. All of it was ministry. In fact, it wasn't because they were doing ministry that was the problem. The problem was they were trying to do ministry without God. They got so busy with ministry that they left out the why of ministry. Let me just tell you the why of every ministry. The why of every ministry is Jesus Christ. You miss Him, you miss everything. That's the why of ministry. First and foremost, love Jesus. They got so busy with ministry, it was such a routine that they left Jesus behind. They left their first love. They were self-sufficient, they were self-serving and self-motivated, self-confident. They were doing church and they were doing a bunch of church things, but they were operating without God's hand on their ministry and their lives. And church, listen to me, please listen to me. That is easy to do. There's always a danger of that. Every Sunday, it's a danger. The reason I pray at the beginning of every service, every single Sunday, the way that I pray, the way that I pray and mention that God, would you help me to preach? God, would you help your people to listen? God, would you help us to respond? God, would you help us to sing? God, would you help us to worship? It's not because I can't think of anything else to pray. It's because there is nothing else in that moment that needs to be prayed. It's because we all have a problem. All of us have a problem with self-sufficiency. I know you can come to this church and miss Jesus. You can bow your head and pray and miss Jesus. You can sing all the songs that we have and you can miss Jesus. We can shake hands with the people around us and you can miss Jesus. We can put on church events and church ministries and miss Jesus. For our band up here, you can come up here and play and you can miss Jesus. For the people working in the children's ministry, they can work and minister to our kids and they can miss Jesus. All of our teachers for our adult classes, listen to me, teachers, you can do that kind of work and you can miss Jesus. I can stand up in this pulpit and I can miss him. Again, if we miss Jesus, we miss everything. Seriously. There's a danger of self-sufficiency. There's also a danger of overwhelming circumstances. It's been several years now. I was riding a two-man. We're a partner unit. And for those of you that are familiar with the roadway that I'm about to mention, it was 730 north, traveling southbound toward 199. So I was at the 199 bridge and 730. And we happened to pull over a DWI, me and my partner. And they were so intoxicated, couldn't tell where they were stopping. Stopped right in the middle of the turn lane where you would go under the bridge to go left or right on 199 or go straight. So they stopped right there at the intersection. Needless to say, it was high traffic time, early evening, and it was a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. And so we had to deal with it. I couldn't very well tell this person to get back in your car and park somewhere safer. They were not safe to drive. They parked right in the middle of the roadway. Couldn't do it. So I was out there directing traffic. My partner was conducting a DWI investigation, and I was trying to watch my surroundings. It's too many of them. There are too many cars on 730 North, and so I was looking around. Then I faced my partner again to make sure that everything was okay with him, and he could see behind me. And he looked at me, and I saw this worried look on his face, and he said, "Zach, look out!" And I looked back just in time, and if my unit is here and I'm standing here, I stepped back just to have a car come right where I was standing. That fast. And then they ended up wrecking out, ended up being another DWI, right at the corner. There's no doubt in my mind, if my partner would not have called out to me, I wouldn't have made it out of that situation alive. No question in my mind. I didn't see him. It was dark. They didn't even have their headlights on. There's too much going on. It was too much. And in that moment, since there was so much going on, I needed some help from the outside. I needed somebody to rescue me. I want to submit to you this morning that as we become a congregation that asks God to bless us indeed, and for God to enlarge our coast, that we're also going to be a congregation thrust into progress in danger of two things: self-sufficiency and too many circumstances. Congregation that will be seriously, in some instances, in over our heads and placed in situations that are far, far bigger than we are. There will be tasks that we will have that we are absolutely incapable of meeting and completing without some divine help. And so we need God's hand to help us to perform that work. That the job is going to be so big that He's going to need to rescue us. That's okay. But I also want to submit to you that God is eager to show Himself strong to those who are willing to risk, to do a little bit more, because God's hand is on their ministry. God's hand is on their life. So for the next few minutes, I want to talk about what it means for God to enable us. What it means to have God's hand on our lives. First of all, let me say, when Jabez says that your hand might be with me, you need to understand everyone needs God's hand on their lives. Everyone. It's not an extra. This is not oh, by the way, God, could you touch my life? God's hand on your life is a normal, everyday need that every single one of you have. It's an acknowledgement that if God's hand is not on what you're doing, then you should have no part in it. That's what Jabez understood. He was telling God, God, I don't want your blessing and not have you. I'm not doing this without you. I'm not praying big without you. I don't want your blessing, God, and not have you. I don't want an enlarged coast. I don't want a greater influence and not have you. I need your hand on my life, and if you don't do it, God, I don't want it. You see, one of the reasons I think that some of God's people aren't seeing the kind of blessings that they would like and aren't as satisfied with the life that they are living is because they don't know how to acknowledge God with the life of blessing that they already have. God doesn't answer because it would be more of the same kind of living from us. Listen, this is important. You see, there is an obligation that comes with every blessing. And that's because it's God's hand that makes it happen. And there's an acknowledgement that you should understand that this blessing came from God. There's a caution that comes from every blessing. And that caution is that we can become so comfortable with the blessing that there is no longer a need for the blesser. That was the caution that God gave his people in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 10 through 12. Let me show you something. It's going to blow you away, or maybe not. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 10 through 13. And it shall be, when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he sware unto your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give you great and goodly cities. God is fulfilling his promise, and he's going to bless you beyond your wildest imagination. It shall be. This is going to happen. Which thou buildest not, and houses full of all good things, which thou fillest not, and wells digged, which thou diggest not, vineyards, olive trees, which thou plantest not. When thou shalt eaten and be full, then beware, lest thou forget the Lord, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Did you see that? When you're blessed, God says, whenever you're not having to struggle as much, God says, when I have allowed blessing to rain down on your life, you're going to like it. No, you're going to love it. It's going to feel good. You're going to have an easier life because of the life that I've blessed you with. But here's what else God says. He says, you better watch out, though. Because with an easier physical struggle, it's going to be much better and you're going to like it. But after that, there's going to be a different kind of struggle. It's going to be a spiritual struggle. And you're going to struggle with the fact if you actually need me or not. You're going to struggle with the fact, do I actually need God in my life? If you don't watch out, blessings can mean that you'll think that you no longer need my hand when times are good. And Jabez didn't want that to happen to him. Jabez wanted to acknowledge what he already had figured out in the past. And by the way, I think that Jabez was a student of history. I think he knew what his people were in here. I think he knew both from his own life and because he watched God's people that he needed God's hand on his life in order to live. And if God's hand wasn't on what he was asking, he did not want any part of it. God, I want you to bless me indeed, he says. God, I want you to enlarge my coast, enlarge my influence, enlarge my voice in the community, enlarge my ability to help people, enlarge my business. But just so I'm clear, I don't want any part of that life if you're not going to be right there with me. If your hand isn't on my life, I don't want it. I don't want any life that excludes you. I don't want any blessing where I don't think I need you anymore. I don't want you watching my life of blessing, God. I want your hand or I don't want your blessing. That's the same thing that Moses prayed to God in Exodus chapter 33 and verse 15. And he said unto him, Moses saying to God, if thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. Don't make me go if you're not in this, God. God, being the leader of a nation is really great, and it's a really high privilege. But God, if you're not in it, don't make me go. I don't want blessing that bad. There is no authority that I need that much. There's no power on this planet that great. God, if you're not with me, I don't want to go. This is the part of the prayer that makes sure that it's God who keeps and maintains the vision of what your life should look like. Let me tell you why I think that some people have all kinds of stuff but don't experience the blessing that should come along with it. It's because it's an accumulation of things that God's hand has never touched. You bought a new car and you made a huge financial decision just because you felt like you wanted it. And now you have a huge car payment, and that blessing is not really a blessing anymore. You look at that car as a scourge. It's not a blessing anymore. It is now a burden. You look at a blessing of a new job. You jumped right in. The opportunity came, but it's taken more of a spiritual toll on your life than you'd care to admit. That stuff happens all of the time. You've got to understand, just because it happens doesn't mean that you have God's hand. You with me? If your blessings have become a burden, you'll know that it did not come from God. The Bible says that when God blesses, He adds no sorrow with it. Does your blessings have sorrow attached to it? Does what you have grieve you sometimes? Does what you have give you anxiety sometimes? Does what you have make you feel unfulfilled sometimes? God's hand might not be on it, folks. And listen, everyone needs God's hand on their life for everything. For everything. But here's the good news. I gave you a 2-pointer last week. I got a 2-pointer this week. I'm on a roll, folks. Everybody needs God's hand on their lives. And let me tell you this. Here's the good news. Everyone can have God's hand for the asking. You believe that? Jabez not only understood his need for God's hand on his life, but he also knew enough to understand God's hand was able to reach out and touch his life if he only asked for it. Now, let me clarify something quickly. When we're talking about God's hand of blessing on our life, we're using what is called an anthropomorphic expression. I've been waiting so long to say the word anthropomorphic in a sermon. Where's Judy at? Is she in here somewhere? Oh, she's in children's church. Judy gave me a rule. If you're listening to this, Judy, she gave me a rule. I could only use words no longer than 7 letters long. That's what she said. So I don't do that anymore. But I got to. I have to. That's the only way to explain it. This is an anthropomorphic expression. This means that we're attributing to God certain human or physical characteristics. To make human, that's what an anthropomorphism is. We do this so that we can better understand the idea being presented. Other anthropomorphic expressions would include the arm of God, or the finger of God, the eyes of the Lord, and several things like that. The idea of God's hand being with us occurs many times throughout the pages of Scripture, and it carries with it many different meanings. I want us to just consider 5 of those meanings and apply them to our desire for an enhanced, expanded, and enabled life. You ready? When you're asking for God's hand on your life, I'll tell you this. He'll give you His hand of His presence. Daniel chapter 10 and verse 10. Now, I've got a lot of verses for you. You'd probably be good to write those down. I've got more verses today than I usually have, but these are good. Daniel chapter 10 and verse 10, and behold, an hand touched me, anthropomorphism, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. There was a story I heard recently about a 3-year-old boy who accidentally spilled all of his Kool-Aid. He decided to clean up the mess himself, so he dashed out to the back porch to get the mop. Suddenly, he realized it was dark outside, and dark things are scary. Became apprehensive for reaching out the door to go get the mop, and he thought for a moment, and he recalled his mother telling him that Jesus was everywhere, even in the dark. So he thought for a moment longer, and opening the door just enough to stick his head out, he said, Jesus, if you're out there, can you hand me the mop? I'm glad that there's no, are you out there when it comes to God? He's out there. When it comes to attempting great things for God, the last thing I want to do is get in over my head spiritually without the presence of God being on it. It's the last thing I want to do. The last thing I want to do, I would be an absolute fool if I tried to get up here and preach to you without the presence of God on my life. We would be absolutely foolish if you tried to come in here and tried to worship one day without the presence of God being on your life. You'd be foolish to try to do what you need to do with your family and lead your children like you need to lead your family without the presence of God on your life. But it's there for the asking. God, would you be with me in this? There are things that you're dealing with even greater. God will not only give you the hand of His presence, He'll give you the hand of His provision. Psalm 104, verse 28. Thou openest thine hand, and they are filled with good. Psalm 145, verse 16. Thou openest thy hand and satisfies the desire of every living thing. If after praying for an enhanced life, and that's what we're doing, we're trying to explode our prayer life, to pray bigger things. After we're praying for God for an enhanced life, and an enabled life, and an expanded life, and God, remember from last week, searches our hearts, and He sees an honorable intent. Remember, Jabez was an honorable man. He was more honorable than all of his brethren, that little short biography says. It matters about your character, whether God answers you or not. I'll just remind you of that real quick. If God sees our motives are pure and our intentions are honorable, that is, the honorable intentions that are request for expansion and enhancement and enablement, all of that. He sees that our motives are pure, that is for the glory of God, for the good of mankind. Chances are He'll grant you the request, that just like He did with Jabez. But if He does that, you're going to need a few things. Again, recap from last week. If God does increase the sphere of our influence and multiply the sum of our opportunities and enlarge the size of our ministry, first of all, we're going to need some boldness, a little bit of boldness, courage, to launch out into the deep, if you will. But seriously, I thank God for His word. I would be all over the place. Listen to Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 10. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 13. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. Not only do we need boldness, but we'll also need, once again, awareness to know that when God is opening those doors, what steps to take when He does. But thankfully, wherever God guides, He provides. He'll also give you the hand of His protection. He'll protect you. Psalm 37, verse 24, though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with His hand. Doing something big for God is not without its difficulties. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Satan's not just going to step aside and let you go untouched. You listening to me? Here's what you're going to find. You're going to find that when you decide to rise above mediocrity, you're going to get the devil's attention. And it's going to be game on, folks. I was thinking about this comparison. It's kind of like a gamer being involved in a boxing fight via video game and then real life. I remember in my family, Dad, you remember that when we first got a Nintendo? Bought a Nintendo for the family. First, it was all about Super Mario Brothers. So we prayed Super Mario Brothers. Do you ever have to like blow in the thing and you stick it back in and magically works? There's something magical on your breath that helps it to work. But another game that we played was called Punch Out. You ever play Punch Out? Yeah. My parents and I, my sister and I primarily, but we would all play Punch Out, and you'd come against these different guys, and they would jump around. They'd have a right hook that you have to duck, and if you didn't, it'd take most of your life away. It'd knock you out, and you're just trying to get through these different levels, And I remember thinking I got so frustrated with one of the guys. I don't remember his name, but I think it was Contender 7. I was trying to get that belt, I needed to be victorious. And it took me so long to fight. You want to know something? It was just a video game, though. I wasn't real. The good feeling that I got from a graphic design giving me a belt wasn't real. It's a lot different trying to fight on a video game than it is trying to fight in real life. Man, it's kind of what life is. It's like playing Punch Out opposed to actually somebody stepping into the ring. One, you're just trying to pretend. The other, that's real life. That's where the real stuff is. That's where the hard stuff is. You can play like you're fighting from the comfort of your own home and come away inside your Christian life without a single scratch or a single cut or a single bruise. But if you make that choice to climb into the ring because you're trying to pray for enhancement, you're trying to pray for enlargement, you're trying to pray for increased opportunities, I'm telling you folks, you're gonna take some shots. You're gonna get bruised. Listen, if you pray for this and you make an effort, don't expect everything to go easier and rosier. Expect it to get harder. You're going to know that you're doing it because you'll be in a fight when you do. Doing something great for God means that you're going to be offended and vulnerable a lot. Because it's going to take you being around people. It always involves people. And people is where the hard stuff is at. I can't believe they said that. They should have known better. If you're having to say stuff like that and then stop yourself, I hate to break it to you, but that means it's working. It's not getting worse. I mean, it's not getting worse for your faith. It's actually helping. That means it's working. When someone was ungrateful and inconsiderate and hurts you, when you were really trying to help, that means it's working. You're launching out into the deep. Expect to take some shots. When you hit a wall of opposition with circumstances, with sickness even, with heartache, with hardship, and everything inside of you is telling you to stop, that means it's working, as crazy as it sounds. That's why most Christians are content to play the game and they talk big from the safety zone of their spiritual comfort zone. But very, very few are willing to really get out there and mix it up. Because when they get out there, they find out really quick it's not a game. It's real life. And you're going to have to take some lumps. But thank God that though we might get knocked down, we don't have to stay down. My friend, listen to me. God protects you. God be my buckler. God be my shield. God keep me going. He'll give you the hand of His protection. He'll also give you the hand of His providence. I love talking about the providence of God. When we talk about the providence of God, we're talking about His dealings in our life that we would normally consider as luck or fate, when in reality, it is God's providential hand at work. I think the hand of God is mentioned by Nehemiah. Nehemiah was burdened to go back to Jerusalem. Just a couple of months ago, we talked about Nehemiah. We looked at the back half of his story. His burden to go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, but in order to do that, he had to get permission from the king. Unfortunately, it was the king as part of the reason why that work stopped in the first place. What Nehemiah needed before he went over there is Nehemiah needed a miracle. He prayed for 4 months. 4 months, and finally received permission to do what he was desiring to do. And in Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 8, he attributes his going to Jerusalem not to luck, not to fate, but as he puts it, he says, the good hand of my God upon me. As we begin to pray about doing more for God and to seek more opportunities and enduring more for God, we can be assured that God's hand will be open. It'll be opening doors, and He will put His hand on us and create for us circumstances that will help us accomplish His will for us. If I throw out a boat hook from the boat and I catch hold of the shore and I pull and I pull and I pull, let me ask you this. Do I pull the shore to me, or do I pull myself to the shore? I ask that because I want you to understand something about the prayer of Jabez. We're not trying to pull God in line with our will. We're trying to pull ourselves in line with God's will, with His leading, with the providential dealings of our life. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 9, a man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Psalm 37 verse 23, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delighteth in His way. You're going to like the journey. Friend, let me tell you this. If you ask Him, He'll also give you the hand of His power. His power. A couple of verses. I won't read them, but just so you can look at them later. Joshua chapter 4, verse 24 speaks about the power of God. Exodus chapter 15 and verse 6, power. You'll see the power of God's hand in both of those verses. But the verse I really want to give you is Psalm 109, verses 26 to 27. You ready for this? Watch this. Help me, O Lord my God. O save me according to Thy mercy, that they may know that this is Thy hand, that Thou, Lord, hast done it. When's the last time God did something so great in your life that it could only be attributed to Him? Listen to 2 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 9. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward Him. The Hebrew word for perfect, it means whole, W-H-O-L-E, or full, F-U-L-L. Perfect towards Him, whole toward Him, full toward Him. God is looking for men and women in whose lives He can do something great. But these men and women have to be willing to rise above mediocrity. They've got to be willing to be all in for God. Are you all in for God? I don't want to use that as a tagline. I just want you to answer it in your heart. Are you all in? If you're a Christian, let me hear God's people today. There you are. You have the option of living your life on one of two levels. You can live your life in the realm of the mediocre, the realm of the mundane, the level manageable, that you can control every kind of thing, and you can live on a level marked by just boring Christianity, or you can live a level on the miraculous. If you've chosen to live your life on the level of the manageable, listen, this message probably isn't for you. Probably didn't resonate with you, because you don't really need God's hand to be with you. You're already doing what you're doing. You've chosen a level of Christian service that suits you, and you're good with it. For some, it might be the level that you've lived on for years now, and the truth is you have no plans to interrupt the status quo. On the other hand, there are those of you whose hearts have been stirred to do something great for God, to do more for God. And listen, I'm excited for you, because when God sees fit to show up big in your life, it's going to be awesome. I don't want to limit you to tell you what kind of possibilities are, but if God's filling in the blank for your life, it's going to be a good one. And I would remind you that God is eager to show himself strong toward those who take risks to what he wants done. He'll do that for you. Church, listen to me. I mean it with all my heart when I say I want you to start praying big. Big deliverance from your problems. Whatever answer that would be, for the glory of God, for the good of others, right? Whatever answer. Don't fill in the answer yourself. God, how do you get the maximum glory out of this? Not unto us, O Lord. Not unto us. But unto thy name give glory, for thy mercy, for thy truth's sake. If you fill in that amount, it's going to be too small. I'm looking for us to pray big. I'm looking for us to influence more. I'm looking for you to take some more risks for the sake of the gospel. I'm not telling you about foolishness. I'm talking to you about faith. Let's do it together. I was talking to our Sunday school class about some of the hurts that we're dealing with, and there's some big things that need to be taken care of in the lives of the people of this church. But you know what? The person next to you is just as broken to your left and just as broken to your right, and you're right there broken in the middle. I said, hey, how about this? How about just as a church, we just be broken together? You believe that God can work through all of that for his glory? Yeah, you do. So let's pray big. Stand with me. Let's do that now.
Thank you for listening to this installment in the series. The remainder of the series can be found on our From the Book podcast.